Well, let's get started. Taylor, thank you for your diligent notes once again. Very, very good job. Um, so today we're going to discuss different options for how we might want to invest the money that we set aside in the SERP for electric vehicle mechanic training locally. So that'll be the first point of discussion. Then we want to choose an option to move forward, to move this forward. And we'll, after this meeting, we'll develop some sort of a poll, give everybody a chance to review the materials and discussion. And then we will form a recommendation for the full CSC. So the question at hand, and I'd like to open the floor up for this, is how do each one of you see our investment from AB 617 being used with the EV mechanic program?
Do you mind, I don't know that I know everyone on here. Do you mind if we do a quick round of introductions? That helps, or maybe I can do, since you're in the car and I know it's harder on your phone, maybe I can drop in, we have that continuous agenda. I can introduce it to folks. I think this is their first subcommittee. Does that work? Is that okay?
Yeah. So do you want to lead that then?
Yeah, I can pull that up right now since it's so much easier to have my computer already. Okay. So for those, this might be your first subcommittee for some folks. So there have been, in the Stockton CSC process, several folks from the CSC have volunteered to be co-leads. And through that process, have worked with the district or even just independently with other project partners to put together an agenda in a format that Stephanie has already linked in here. And that's called we call it our continuous agenda. And it was really created originally by a couple of co-leads from a different group. And it definitely seems to be taken off many of our different subcommittees. So I'm just going to point you out to it because what I think we can do is, if for the sake of time, we wanted to get to the next rest of the meeting. One of the things you could do
Jessica, I need to interrupt. I'm sorry. Your mic is a bit choppy. Douglas was right about that today.
You know, I think maybe Ed, can we mute you? I don't know if it might be my mic too, but I'm hearing lots of feedback.
You know what? I will be the reason for that. Interestingly enough, the electric portion of the car gives a lot of background noise, and I'm sorry, I forgot about that. Muting.
Does it sound a little bit better right now, or am I still choppy? Sounds better? Okay, thank you. Awesome. I think there was maybe just feedback. It happens. All right. Thank you for stopping me, Margot. And thanks, Ed. All right. So the link, and maybe I'll ask Stephanie if you can drop it in again. If anyone joined late, they might not be able to see it in the chat. This is the continuous agenda. And what's in here right now is a variety of links that are sort of just, I think, catered to be support for the rest of this meeting and really for this subcommittee as you move forward. And one of the things that's a big resource that you can start to use right now is if you go to this, and maybe I'll also drop in this specific link in the chat right now. This is and we'll put in the actual month here. We can assist the co-leads with this. You can go in here right now and sign in. This is linked on the agenda. I'm going to try to drop it in the chat. And you can go in and sign in and put your name and email address and organization. That way we can see everyone who was at this meeting. We are recording, but it is nice to kind of get your contact information. And that way, maybe in lieu of going through and doing introductions, although I'm happy to defer if the co-leads want to continue with that, that sounds great. But I want to just let you all know that that's a place that I'm sure will be a resource for your co-leads moving forward. Here you can see the meeting objectives that the co-leads came up with. So as Ed said, discuss the different options based on some research that your co-leads have already done with the district and with other partners. And an objective, but perhaps not necessarily something that will happen today, is look at the materials. Maybe there's going to be a doodle poll or something else that will sort of help guide or get feedback from you all based on the discussion today, it sounds like. And then the rest is, this is the agenda, and you can see a lot, again, as I said, your co-leads have done a lot of prep work for this meeting. And so you can see some of their prep work within this agenda. So I'll just point that out to you in terms of kind of what I assume the rest of the conversation is going to be about today. But I'll leave it to them to go over this, just kind of giving you a little tour. And then the final thing I will say is that if we go to and maybe it's not here, so I'm going to totally miss my mark. So I'm just going to go here where I know I'm going to grab it. Is if I go to our regular AB 617 page, our Stockton community page, and go to subcommittees and click on EV mechanic training, you can go up here. You can see this is where the continuous agenda always lives. So you don't have to go to your email. And this is, again, you can navigate here on the side to this particular page as well. And you can click and see what the measure says in the SERP. So I know that one of the things right now is to review the SERP measure. So I can just pull that up or even link that in the chat for you to go and take a look at. So here we go. I'm going to also drop this in here. And then Ed, now that I've given a little tour, I can pass it back off to you if you want to start kind of talking about the measure, kind of maybe the work you've done that leads you guys.
I'm sorry to interrupt. This is the interpreter. I'm just letting you guys know that the sound is getting choppy.
For me, when I'm talking, everyone?
Yes, when you're talking, it's getting choppy again.
Oh, interesting.
It likely is getting choppy because I went off of mute. Be the culprit here. So if I am, I apologize. Maybe Jessica, you could take us back to the agenda for today, put it back up on the screen. And I'll try to get back into mute mode here as quickly as possible. Could you go down with it just a little bit, please? Could you click on initial options so that we can at least begin discussion regarding that? And if you don't mind leading that, I would appreciate it, and I'll get on mute again.
Not at all. I know that. So what I'll do maybe just before that is maybe I'll quickly review this. It's very, very short. But just to remind folks, if it's been a minute since you've taken a look at the SERP measure or you're new to this process, there was a general SERP measure that you all wanted in the SERP where the goal was to provide opportunities to develop and advance education of personnel on the mechanics, safe operation and maintenance of alt fuel vehicles and infrastructure. And really what we mean by that is electric vehicle mechanics. And so we have an initial amount that we put in there that would be per training course for up to 10 training courses. Through a lot of research and a lot of work done with partners who are already doing this, not only up and down the valley, but specifically at Delta College in Stockton, we had a couple of listening sessions and a couple of discussion sessions that were open to the public, as well as some side conversations with the co-leads that found that the work that's being done may not necessarily lend itself to the exact way that this measure is written, in the sense that some of that's already being funded, and we want to maybe leverage that and build upon what's already happening in order to take advantage of the funding we do have and continue to support EV mechanic training and development. So what Ed asked me to bring up, well, maybe I'll stop there, see if there's any quick questions. I've seen SB's hand and I didn't use it.
yes, thank you.
So in terms of the mechanic training, is it just for the electric vehicle? Are we also talking about the training for the semis or any other of the larger utility vehicles? That is, I know it's part of like the air district trade-in, but as far as like the training that we're talking about specifically here with this component of the SERP.
And that's a great question, something that I know that other folks have even more experience with. This is sort of would be your base train. Well, again, as designed, but obviously there are options we're going to discuss today, is to be sort of your base training for understanding how to work on electric vehicles, primarily passenger vehicles, for a couple of reasons. One is not that this isn't necessarily true for trucks as well, but a lot of folks, the main barrier into getting an electric vehicle, or one of the barriers, is where do I go or to get it serviced? Even a good example here in Fresno, which is an even bigger city, and more centrally located, I have several coworkers that have to drive 3 hours to go get their car serviced. And so the example is, well, can we do some training in order to make sure that there is service in the area, that folks that are helping service this are maybe folks from the area. So now we're really like getting into job creation, workforce development, and supporting transition to electric vehicles. Though I can imagine, and I don't know this definitively, but maybe folks that have better understanding, I can imagine that this type of basic training that we've been talking about at the colleges, and with training with maybe specific folks, lend itself to be a setup for folks that maybe are going to go to the electric heavy duty truck side. So it's not necessarily exclusionary, although again, there are some options. It sounds like that would be primarily for vehicles that Ed's sort of lending to. And Ed, I'll defer to you. Maybe you have more to say.
Yeah, one of the things that we identified in your question was really good. When we talked with Delta College, was that their issue is feeder education, that they can't seem to find enough, quite frankly, technicians that read and write well enough to be able to work through their program, and they needed a boost, kind of a lead in, so that we can get more individuals involved in the program. And and that's feedback only from Delta College. Valley Can is actually doing several different programs with electric vehicle mechanic training currently, and they're even doing some at high schools, which is kind of exciting. Valley, I don't think anyone from Valley Can is here today, but the reason that we're looking at different options now is what is going to be the best for our community members to bring them into this new electric world as quickly as possible. So that's why we want to have the discussion today.
Thank you, Ed. I am going to share the document now that you've asked me to share, which is that list of initial options. And these are options that were put together by the co-leads with support and just brainstorming from some partners, like I said, who are already doing this. One of them is called Valley Can, who are Clean Air Now, that Ed was just referring to. This is not necessarily like, these have not been vetted, or you all know this if you've been involved so far. We have to put together a project plan. It has to be approved by CARB. So there are still steps. So these aren't options that have been vetted and they're 100% ready to go, but really options for, okay, how do we as a CSC subcommittee want to drive forward with the next steps? And they put together some really great options. I'm going to share them right now. I did just drop the link in the chat. And one of the assumptions that that Taylor and Ed note here is that in taking a look at these options they've put together, it's pretty maybe evident to them with all the research they've done, is it's really down to, let's pick one of these options and focus really in on them and see what they can do for the community. So Ed, would you like me to sort of just summarize kind of these options for folks?
Yes, please. That would be the best, I think, at this point. Awesome.
So the first one here is support on Valley Can. Again, that's a group that is already working on this particular stuff. And they have, if you were at our town hall that we had, they are the ones who shared primarily a lot of background on this. And again, they've been working with the co-leads. So one of the options is to support them, build upon their current program, and increase the inclusion, success, and placement of students in their cohorts or their groups of students, so they can move into more in-depth programs at Delta College in particular is kind of the goal here. So there are equipment costs and other services that maybe aren't currently being paid for that we can use this money to invest in and kind of push forward the program that seems to already be working. Douglas, do you have a clarifying question on that before I move on to summarizing the?
Yeah, I cannot break my hand anyway, but I can't find the function. But anyway, to back up a little bit, what you're just saying, did did Ted manage how the Delta College became? Is he a teacher? Because I know, or what is it? Because I know they were talking about Stockton, USD had a program, and also the San Joaquin Board of Education. They have their trade mechanic and trade school there too. That will. Oh, but they have their own grant writer as well to make if they're in need, they'll make it happen. So I don't know. There always have to be specific on Delta College, or it could be other places that offer free education. And then, because I know you have to pay the tuition, but trade school is a lot different. So is there a saving between those type of recruitment?
Right. Maybe I'll just say, and this is, I don't want to speak for the co-lead, so please step in. I'll just say globally, in terms of what we've been looking at, I think all felt like originally the measure was intended to do kind of one specific thing within a program that's already established. And now that we have these programs that are established and there's already a cohort, really trying to leverage that. Now, I think to your point, I don't think that, and you guys all correct me if I'm wrong on this, the Delta College, I think, is part of the State Center Community College District. So that's a state type program. I don't know that the San Joaquin Board of Education would be involved in that. I think you're talking about a separate location. I would imagine that whatever we do with, that 150K, that we maybe try to focus it in one spot and really leverage that for maybe one of these options, or an option like one of these, maybe we massage it a little bit. But I think Delta College already having an established program, being within the community, serving members of the community that are already starting to go through this, might be the best way we can get this done within the kind of confines of the cert.
And to add to that.
Okay, I think that's made a great point. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Douglas, to add to that, the amount of money in the CERP for this is pretty minuscule for big challenges about sending students immediately into the program. So that's why we were looking at the feeder with Valley Can, so that we can try to use it in the most effective way possible. And I see Taylor, thank you for joining us. You want to speak to that at all?
Yeah, and thank you both so much for covering for me while I was racing back from the county office bed. So yeah, and appreciate all of y'all's patience with me. So I think broadly, Jessica, do you mind just sharing your screen again real quick relative to those three options?
Not at all. I'm happy to let you take over too. So I will just share screen and scroll.
Yeah, so I think broadly, we were looking at Delta College. We identified it in the SERP and prior to the SERP's implementation during the design phase, because they are like the one player in the space right now who has a 2-year accredited program for EV mechanics. And Margot, to your point previously, they also do have programming for heavy duty. So forklifts, heavy duty trucks, et cetera. And we wanted to make sure that we were like, 150K is not going to build you a new program, right? But what it can do is like help direct people into that program, help ensure the program goes well, provide supportive services, provide a way or a pathway out. So by which I mean like a recruitment into jobs after the program is complete. So those three categories are basically how we oriented the three options here. So option one is really about the front end. To Ed's point previously, Delta flagged for us that one of their biggest barriers is getting people in the door who have the requisite math, reading, and writing skills to be able to have a high chance of likelihood or a high likelihood of graduating out of their program. The success rate of like who they recruit in has a lot to do with who successfully comes out of it. The second option is the supporting the program itself at Delta. So like during that 2-year period, what can we do to offer support to individual students, or through training, through getting people in the door, through actually discovering the program itself, or some other element that we understand from Delta to support people during that 2-year period. And then the third one is the back end. So basically job placement coming out of Delta's program into whether it's an internship, fellowship, apprenticeship, or just a job. So they can offer those to Delta graduates after they've graduated out. So at a high level, that's kind of like where we identified those 3 options, and then certainly wanted to make room for any like 4th options that folks here in the subcommittee identify.
You know, I want to make a point. Nate's been writing in the chat quite a bit about the need for mechanics in the bus industry. Nate, would you mind talking to us a little bit about what the needs are from your point of view?
Yes, what I was trying to say, and I'm not trying to say too much here, but I just wanted people to know, because they may not be aware of it. The San Joaquin RTD has been dealing with first hybrid and now all electric buses since 2003. And they have a very large fleet of hybrid buses. Almost all, in fact, all of their bigger buses, 40-foot or 45-foot buses, are hybrid and or electric. They're already basically beyond conventional diesel buses anyway. And so, but they do have a mechanics shortage, both for diesel mechanics and for electric. And the other thing I was trying to explain, they've been working with Proterra Bus Company, which is the first American battery electric bus company. They started by putting battery buses on transit buses for the now famous Denver downtown 6th Street corridor, whatever it was that turned downtown Denver around. That company that did that with prototype buses became a manufacturing company in 2002 called Proterra. And RTD, Foothill Transit of Southern California, and a bunch throughout the United States have bought now over 1,000 buses from Proterra. RTD needs mechanics for both diesel mechanic, and they have all these electric buses with electric motors and transmissions, either hybrid and or battery electric. RTD's also done what's called quick charge, which is the pods up in the air and the bus drives in and mates with it for like 10 minutes. And that's somewhat problematic and very hard to schedule the routes. But more so, RTD is already investing now in depot chargers, where you put heavy duty charges in at your bus maintenance garage and you plug in buses overnight. And a single depot charger, I believe, can charge 2 buses in an evening at about 4 hours per each bus. And those are known as extended life battery buses, if I remember right. But RTD's already committed publicly to going all electric by 2030. And that's a combination, yeah, that's, I believe, replacing the hybrid buses with electric buses. So all I'm saying is, in addition to Delta College, you have 2 other local sources that actually need mechanics and would want to partner with a program to develop mechanics, which would therefore benefit what we want, which is mechanics and infrastructure throughout the county for battery electric cars and heavy duty trucks. And then also, let's remember the Stockton, because we've talked about this at numerous AB 617 meetings. Stockton Unified, I famously already has bought, what, 6 or 8 buses? And I believe they've already installed millions of dollars of infrastructure.
Excuse me, this is the interpreter. If you could just slow down just a little bit.
I'm sorry. Former
Thank
radio
you.
broadcaster.
It's okay.
Okay, so RTD has a nearly entire fleet of buses that's either diesel electric hybrid and or battery electric. They're transitioning from quick charge buses, which require infrastructure at transit hubs, to battery to depot chargers that charge buses overnight, and they do it while the buses are parked overnight, and you get the electricity at a lower rate off of PG&E, and or you can have your own charging facilities and solar power charging developed. And then lastly, I want to remind everyone, the Stockton Unified's already installed millions of dollars of infrastructure and invested, I think, in 6 or 8 buses. So we have at least three local sources, which would be Delta College, RTD, and Stockton Unified. That's the only point I'm trying to make. But there is a lot of expertise in Stockton.
You're describing a lot of like placement for jobs, which I think is really important. And I think the focus of today is very much like the training itself, and what you're describing, I think, applies to option 3, and that might be something that you're valuing relative to job placement coming out of that program. I also want to make sure that we have hands up relative Margot, and then SB, and then Doug. I see your hand up as well. So Margot, do you want to go ahead?
Two questions, and one for you, Taylor and Ed, I think. The Delta program, saying that they have, trying to find the candidates for the program with the proper skills, is that because it's a 2-year program? Is that because it's an AA program? Or would there be the opportunity to have it as a certification program and they're lacking the skills for that?
It's an AA program.
So could Delta offer it as a certification program, or is that not an option for Delta? You know, sometimes the universities will offer certification programs where all you do is you do the specific courses for what you're looking at. Just food for
They-
thought.
They actually do have a certification program, but it's done more on the diesel side with heavy equipment, not so much on the electric. But I want to add to Nate's comment. We also have industrial forklifts that are already electric that are operating. So there is other outlets besides the ones Nate mentioned for job opportunities. So I didn't mean to cut you off there.
And
Yes.
Doug has his question.
Okay, Doug.
I just think that I think that's something that Ned kind of elaborate because just going to Delta College to become a mechanic. I mean that's a good thing but to regulate so much certification, so much AA degree. People don't go just for the degree, but they also have a program for certification as well. People are already working at the mechanic and they wanted to do more. They want to do more specialty. They're going to keep learning at their technology, keep changing, cars keep changing, model keep changing. So they have to be on top of those things. So with an AA, I mean, that's to me, that's kind of like it's a regulation from, to try to accomplish to become a mechanic, and yet people who are already working at the mechanic to still be certified through a certified certificate program from Delta College. Either way, it will work that way, and it'll still be the demand anyway, regardless it's AA or it's a certification, regardless. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. SB, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I think that if it's an AA versus certification, there's going to be an issue with them getting students, because kind of going to Douglas's point, there's going to be people who need the certification to get into the internship, to get into the green jobs. And so I wanted to say, like, when you talked about the fourth option, I think if we were to take this like small amount of money that's allocated and trying to bring people into the program for Delta College, if there was a way for them to do that modification and try it out as a certification, and to bring in that component like the pre-screening, the feeder education that you talked about with the reading, writing, and math, I think that we would need to like couple up almost like a boot camp version where we can like demonstrate what they would be doing, right, as an EV mechanic, so I know that Valley Can, we have vehicles through them, and so do other organizations. So then obviously like that lends itself in terms of like what you had talked about post-placement for internships. But if we're gonna, I don't know if this is to include stipends for these students as part of it, so that they would, in terms of the motivational factor, you're going to do, if we have a cohort to do the reading, writing, math, and a boot camp introduction as to what does the AV mechanic do? How much do they get paid? And kind of like a pre-internship almost. And then I think that would be a motivating factor, because it's when it's unknown as to like what it is that is expected of them as a postgraduate, whether it's a certificate or an AA, until they become enrolled and committed. But prior to that, obviously they're having an issue. So if we could do something, if we're going to, according to the notes that you all have from previous meetings, if we're trying to bring people in and feed them into this program, we would need to have some like motivational component to it, right? Besides, okay, you need more reading, writing, and math. So, but they're not going to come for that because they don't know what's expected of them at the end of the day. So we have to show them at the end, this is what you have, a career pathway that pays so much. And this is what you would be doing, kind of like a demo of what that looks like to be an EV mechanic. And so then working with, you know, local, like I know that you had on there, like the different local, you know, besides Valley Can being the conduit between that, but then being, you know, having the dealerships. And to the point that was made earlier, a lot of the dealerships, we have the Volkswagen, so we have to go to Tracy. So it's still within San Joaquin County, but it might not be in Stockton. So then kind of looking at what are the dealerships that currently do have access for a potential intern shadowing boot camp, you know, feeder education program, and seeing where they're located and seeing what they have as far as full electric vehicles, because there might not be a lot of them in Stockton. It might be within San Joaquin County, and you know, any part of that you need help with, you know, I can work with you or with Valley Can on that, because I think that's something that would help us to kind of hone in on, you know, what we can put in place as far as a program for this, to try to attract people. I think it's a very key and very important, but we have to like demonstrate to them what it looks like.
Yeah. Thank you, SB. I think that's a great idea. Making sure that people are very aware of like what, not just like a training program that they're signing up for, but like a potential career future that they're signing up for, and how important it is to be very clear about those expectations up front. And to your point around Valley Can, I think maybe I can provide a bit more detail on what we shared out relative to those options, because that first option is really about getting Valley Can into a Stockton presence. And Florence, to your question in the chat, one of the first places they're looking right now is at Weber Institute. And I'm not totally sure where they're at in that conversation, but Ed and I just got an email from them this morning that they want to update us on some developments on their end. So that might be where their interest is. But yeah, to your point, I don't think it's about just making sure that folks are like educated and getting on math, reading and writing, that it's like actually creating like a very tangible path into an existing program. So I think what you're describing is 80% of option one, like let's get Valley Can to get people up to snuff on a very introductory course. They offer essentially like a 4 credit course, which is an introduction to like Ohm's law and some like the early like electrical standards they would need to be successful in a program like Delta's, and getting some of those like those skills early on. And then this other piece about like a job shadowing or like a career shadowing, I think would be a really important and really cool thing to like build out, maybe in partnership with like Nate, to your point, at RTD, or with the port and servicing their vehicles or dealerships. But I think that'd be a really cool facet to be able to build into that.
To add to what Taylor just mentioned, SB, and I appreciate your comments also, we did talk about a potential mentoring program because we're trying to target people within our AB 617 footprint that are looking to make themselves better, that we develop a program where we follow up. Some of the CSC members actually make that phone call once every week or two to say, hey, how are you doing? What are your struggles? What are your issues? How can we help you overcome those things as part of that? We're not, again, that was just one of the ideas that we talked about to build that feeder. And I'm anxious, like Taylor is. I've been on the road today too, Taylor. So I'd like to hear what Weber and what Valley Can communication is. So, great feeder would be a high school feeder to start with. And I've said this before, I've been involved in some other programs. If we can ultimately get a young person over to a college like Delta, even if it's just doing a very small picture of class, the chances of that person taking more classes and making themselves eat better is far greater than just a cold turkey, you need to go to college, comment. So anyway.
No, thank you. And the other thing you might, in terms of adding, like you said, RTD, the port, in terms of like a shadowing, we're also working as Cafe Coop with the Frito-Lay project. It's in Modesto, but I know for a fact that they would lend themselves to do something of the sort because they're doing everything in terms of the alternative fuel vehicles. And then once the Tesla semis are ready, which are supposedly by the end of the year, then and then even having a walkthrough and like a demo for this cohort, I think would be really key and important because it will demonstrate them on various scales as to what the opportunities and pathways could be for them, should they decide to go this route.
I think an important thing that's falling out of this right now is that I was very bearish on what market is like for these jobs right now, but I've just heard of like a lot of folks who would need mechanics or maybe even desperate for mechanics. So that's something that I was like very curious about heading into this conversation, but I'm hearing a lot of there would actually be need. And I'm not too familiar, SB, with the Frito-Lay project that you just described, but can you give a little bit of detail on that?
Just real quick, it's the zero and near zero emissions, one of the ZANCEF programs. And so it's taking place at the Frito-Lay plant in Modesto. And they have upgraded their vehicles. They had made a commitment. It was through those grant monies that they were able to do it. It's a matching grant. So obviously Frito-Lay had to commit, the additional funds. It's with the Air District and with Frito-Lay and with all the various partners, which there are quite a few, because there's quite a few in terms of transition into those zero and near zero emission heavy duty vehicles. So I can give you more information on it. And like I said, it hasn't closed the loop completely because the semis aren't ready from Tesla yet. So there's there's that limited information, kind of like what's on the grant. And then we're going to start having tours of the plant itself, once everything is coming to closure on that. But it involves all of those different types of vehicles, and that would be a good exposure for the potential students that we're looking to recruit for the EV program.
And who's servicing those vehicles? It's not on site at Frito-Lay, I'm guessing.
Yeah, no, there's in terms of the service part of it, I'm not sure. I'd have to because they just literally in terms of getting this on set, they just started with all the data collection and everything. It's been ongoing. So as far as the servicing part, it would probably be different folks because it's different type of vehicles that they're using there. And then yeah, so I can get more information on that end part of it.
If you could, that'd be interesting to know. Because we're talking about career shadowing relative to the mechanics program. So yeah, that'd be helpful. Sorry, I interrupted somebody.
I was just going to say, we can also help get that. I imagine it's brand new Tesla trucks. I think it's the first 50 that are coming off the line are going straight there. So I imagine Tesla is doing the, and I'm saying Mia and Carrie probably know way more about this than I do. So
yeah.
But yeah.
For the Tesla ones, yeah. But the alternative fuel vehicles and the others that we know, we're talking about mechanics and, Nate was saying for RTD, it's the mechanics and then just operators as well. So I think they're open to showcasing that, something very specific to this cohort. We can work that in and we can talk to them over at Frito-Lay and let them know, and then get the information, like you said, about, where the end service is going to be at.
Excellent, thank you. I want to hear from others in the group as well relative to this set of options and a potential other fourth option, or there was some modification to one of these three relative to like front end Delta program, back end relative to job placement.
Delta to job placement. Delta to job placement. I don't know. What's that? Not sure I understand.
Oh, Florence, are you asking what I'm asking about relative to placing in jobs?
No, no. I thought we were talking about starting from the what is it? Starting into the feeder program, right? You know, before Delta, because that's pretty much up there. But we're talking about high school prep, maybe, or feeding from high school. And I'm thinking, isn't that the level that we might want to attract individuals to get into the program somehow, or have that program established, a prep to Delta kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to make sure that if others felt differently than that first option, that I wanted to let people give voice to that.
Jonathan, I saw you go off mute there.
I did not. Me too.
All right.
So I'm hearing, go ahead,
Go
Ed.
ahead. No, Taylor, you go ahead.
I'm hearing a lot of energy around option one. And I certainly want to make sure that we're all on the same page, and we can go through like a process to like decide on what option we want to pursue. But just, I guess, to get a temperature check in the room, are we talking about right now basically bringing in Valley Can's program into a school locally to do this kind of, Florence, to use your term, prep to prep to Delta, and trying to build in some element about job shadowing for people who are actually hiring? Is that fair to say?
You know, I actually think that job shadowing and mentoring, while they're different in nature, really fit into the same slot as we move this forward, and that's selling an opportunity to become to have a good wage to raise a family with.
Are any opposed to this idea? Are there others who think, or I shouldn't put it that way, are there people who think there are better ways to do this? Jonathan?
I'm not opposed. I don't think I was. It's more on the. So I know based off the blueprint, you know, a lot of the things we're supposed to bring projects in that lower carbon emissions. I want to make sure that we have a way of selling it that way. Like this is what it's going to do, and we can kind of measure it a little bit. But I also know, I don't care. Like realistically, I think this is important. I think Stockton needs to, but I also know sort of like as a formality, how can we also put that in sort of like a report and stuff? You guys know what I mean?
I think if I can jump, I think what you're asking is like, does this fit in sort of A, what we intended, and B, what can be approved to be funded? Is that kind of your general question?
Yeah,
Jonathan?
yeah. Yes.
Benefit of having Scott here is I know Scott doesn't have all the answers, but we can definitely make sure that that's maybe an assignment for Scott to make sure we touch base, and maybe with the co-leads to kind of keep us all in the loop on like generally. I will say option one feels pretty similar. Like it reads similar to kind of how we set it up in the SERP, right? The job placement, the option 3 feels like it was maybe the furthest away from the original intent. The option 1 feels like it's kind of the same, right? We're paying for some form of training. Maybe it's earlier on in the process. So it does feel like it's in the spirit. And so I can imagine, of course, continuing to work with CARB, we'll double check that. But I think to your point, Jonathan, I don't think selling it will be an issue, and Scott will always be involved.
I'll just hop in here. I've raised my hand, but didn't want to overstep anybody. But I did want to just, I guess, when I look at this measure, no matter how you kind of slice or dice it, it still is ultimately helping to feed into emissions reductions at the end of the day. And while it may not be directly in and of itself reducing emissions, to me it's a little bit like infrastructure, charging infrastructure. You know, having a charger there, that charger does not reduce emissions, but it actually is helping to support and feed into emissions reduction. So I can say with pretty high confidence that, you know, that wouldn't be a hurdle, Jonathan, to how this subcommittee and the CSC ultimately decides to pursue the measure.
Well, that's great to hear. All right, that sounds great. So I think we're like coming fairly close to time here, but I'm hearing option one is just like everyone's very into option one. So I'm tracking some next steps here. One thing that came up is just looking just for due diligence around Delta's program, and if it's strictly AA associated degree, or if it's also a certificate program. And I'm happy to look into that. SV, you had mentioned looking into the Frito-Lay trucks and like where they're potentially getting serviced. Jessica, to your point, probably the Tesla dealership. And we'll send a poll out to make sure that we're like capturing that this is the direction that we're all looking to head in. And I'm missing something.
Well, I wonder if this is Margot, I wonder if Nate's talk about RTD and some options for I could be wrong, but I think they offer some training. Is that what I heard, Nate, or is it?
What I can tell you, now I've been away from RTD for about 2 years, but what I can tell you is somewhere around 2016, and ever since then, they have been working diligently to have mechanic intern training program, a large one, with Delta College. So large, in fact, that RTD had set aside 2 entire maintenance bus bays in their huge new facility out on by the Crosstown Freeway for internship training. I also know, because I helped get a person a job there just recently, that they're short on mechanics in general. But my point about that is RTD not only needs mechanics, they need EV mechanics. The first 3 years that they ran quick charge buses with the pod, Proterra had to have a person on duty almost full time assigned to Stockton just to help the fleet function properly. And then the other point I was making about RTD is going back to 2003, they've been working with a combination of first hybrids and now battery electric. For anyone that does not know this, and I think this will relate to the heavy truck category, which I'm going to be leading and getting meetings started on, heavy duty diesel electric hybrid vehicles operate primarily by having the diesel engine operate through a very sophisticated computer programmed integrated battery, electric motor / transmission. And it takes very specialized training for people to maintain that. So this program, I think, would be something that RTD would love to partner with, because I think they need people.
And what I was thinking, I think that sounds higher level than what I was envisioning here, but I do think it's so important. And I think at least sharing the information, I think we should be connected and share the information with people we reach out to.
Yeah, maybe Jessica or others at the Air District, we can coordinate to recruit some of those folks in the room. Nate, probably you relative to RTD, it sounds like. But yeah, getting some people up front who would be interested in like a job shadowing program would be a great way to like start building this out from the bottom up. Go ahead, Nate.
What I can say is I know all the one great stable thing at RTD as far as personnel has been, it's most of the mechanics that I know and that are in charge of their maintenance garage and their bus fleet maintenance. Most of them have been there for 20 years or more and are very experienced. I know them all. I will certainly voluntarily contact and let them know that the AB 617 program would probably love to have them contact us and get in contact with us to update us on any internship program and how they might partner with us.
And I think so the other next step that I forgot was Ed and I should touch base with Valley Can about their next steps in Stockton. And in doing that and getting them on board with like a career shadowing program, having folks on board and lined up who are like already interested in potentially being a part of that would be probably a pretty huge sell for them, because it takes some of the work off of their plate. So that's a super great call. And Nate, appreciate you reaching out.
Thank you.
Absolutely. We have about 5 minutes left in this meeting, and I want to make sure that any actionable items we've moved forward. We do have there was a discussion about a potential poll, although maybe not necessary if we're all in agreement to presenting the first idea to the CSC. What is the actionable items as we move forward?
That was, yeah, I was going to maybe ask you that same, Taylor. I'd noticed the poll. Do we feel like a poll is indicated? If everyone that's part of the conversation, we seem to have reached a consensus, or do you still want some?
If everyone here is good with option one, which it sounds like we are, like we can do a speak now, forever hold your peace moment. But yeah, it sounds like we.
What is the option one is? I don't know. What was the other option? But option one, what is it about? I missed that part.
The feeder program through Valley Can, so that high school students are prepared to enter Delta's program.
And what program? It can be very in general. What program? The AA program or the certificate program? What are you specifically?
That's my next step, is to look into understanding which one that is, or if they offer both. It sounds like they offer both, but.
In Valley Can Douglas, Valley Can will draw the line very clearly as to how this would progress as we move forward. I'm very certain of that, and we could actually bring them in, I'm sure, to explain that as we move forward.
So maybe, Jessica, maybe what we should do just for due diligence is send out a poll. Is that okay if are you open to doing that?
Totally open to doing it. Does it make sense? I like to, does it make sense for it to just be this captive group that's here right now? Does that
That's what we had talked about with Stephanie, just so everybody had context.
Perfect. So did everyone who's logged in, just because I know some of us that are here aren't, I just want to make sure everyone that's logged in that is part of the CSC maybe got a chance to sign in on that sheet. We do, of course, record these, so I can go back and check, but it does make it a lot easier. And I can also drop in that sign-in sheet. And yep, we can do that.
Cool. Then great. So I think that's one next step. Ed and I are going to touch base with Valley Can. I'll look into the AA versus certification piece. SD was looking into the Frito-Lay trucks, and I think Air District and you and I and Ed, or some portion of us, can look into bringing some other partners into the room who might be interested in the job shadowing career piece.
And just to add to that, if after this meeting you go away and you have a thought that you think would be valuable in developing this as we move forward within the community, please don't hesitate to communicate to myself or to Taylor or to Jessica in whatever manner is easiest for you, and we'll certainly make sure it's part of the consideration.
Great. I think we did it. Jessica, anything to add, or Ed?
Yeah, no, nothing more to say. Thank you so much to everyone who cares about this enough to take an hour out of their afternoon. It's very important. If we can make this thing work, it could really spur and make a difference.